Hi, Zach Physio with another chronic fatigue tip. This time it's about walking. Huge topic, and I'm going to put the disclaimer out right away because chronic fatigue folks have a lot of difficulty with things like heart rate, blood flow, maximum heart rate. So their hearts aren't working as efficiently as normals. And if I'm going to give you some advice, unfortunately, you're going to have to take it at your own risk because I haven't assessed you, and this is a very serious condition which can cause a lot of injury if you're not careful. So there's the disclaimer. Um, Having said that, I spent years trying to figure out how to get myself better from this disabling condition, and years trying to figure out how the heck can I get from point A to point B walking without completely exhausting myself. So the first thing I want to do is just explain a little bit about um, the physiology and the deficits that you likely have with your condition. An apology right off the top. I do these videos usually in one take, so if I stutter or stammer or seem not very organized, it's because it's just I'm doing it off the top of my head, and I've got a few things to do today, so I haven't prepared quite adequately, but I'll give you what I can in the simplest way that I can do that. In chronic fatigue syndrome, typically resting heart rate, the number of beats that your heart beats in a minute, is elevated compared to the normal population. Where if a runner has a training effect on his or her heart, their heart rate usually comes in at 60 beats a minute or below. Your heart rate is working extremely hard, typically higher than 80 beats a minute, maybe even higher than 100 beats a minute, and we call that tachycardia. So if that is the case, you are already losing a lot of energy at rest before you start to walk. Very good idea is to get yourself something called a pulse oximeter, which kind of looks like this, that you just put on your end of your finger as a clip, and it will tell you your heart rate, and it will tell you your oxygen saturation, which is another important concept in that's not quite coming up for me, but I'll show you when it does. Oxygen saturation, which I'll get to in a sec, is another important concept in fatigue. Not only is your heart rate elevated in fatigue, but your ability to extract oxygen from the red blood cells is also affected in fatigue to the point where you can't use all the oxygen that you take in. As a result, um, oxygen is energy. So you you lack the ability to extract oxygen at the level of the tissues, at the muscles, and you have greater impairment um, by virtue of having actually less blood in your system. So you got a few things working against you. There you go. So as you can see, my heart rate is 70. My oxygen saturation is abysmal right now at 92, and it's because I'm speaking. Now watch what happens when I take just a pause. I relax, and nothing happens. Oh, there we go. 95. 98. Okay, so that's a pretty good example for you. You want to be above 96, typically. If you start to fall below 90 with oxygen saturation, um, it's kind of a dangerous situation for you. And that's why I'm saying if you're going to walk somewhere, carry one of these clips. Because as you can see now, I've got things under control. I settled myself down, I relaxed myself, and I feel more energetic. So this is a really good idea for you to monitor both your resting pulse and your oxygen saturation, given the impairments that I've already described. High resting heart rate, which throws off a lot of energy, oxygen saturation that is usually not optimal because you have less blood flow, as well as your inability to extract blood at the level of the tissues. These are important things for you to know. So normal people, and I'm not saying you're abnormal, I'm just saying people without chronic fatigue syndrome, we call them normals. Normals can predict their training zone that they can walk, and usually they calculate this by the number 220 minus your age. So if you're 40 years old, your maximum heart rate is typically calculated as 220 minus 40, which is 180. And then you take something like 55 to 85% of 180, and you get your target zone, the zone by which an exercise effect takes place in. So I guess that's about 90 to approximately 150 beats a minute by that calculation. Just doing that roughly in my head. You can calculate it yourself at home. Now, in chronic fatigue syndrome, your maximum heart rate can't be reached because your heart's a bit sluggish. So you shouldn't even try to reach the upper limit of 220 minus your age, which is again approximately 150 beats a minute or thereabouts if you are 40 years old. So what should you do? Well, you should be at the lower end of your training value there. If you're 40 years old, rough parameters are, I would keep that heart rate not much above 100, and even below that if I was you, if that's possible. And the way that you do that in chronic fatigue syndrome, so that you don't get your heart too elevated and you don't get your saturation below 90, is you use what I call the 90-second rule. Now, it's a bit tedious, but it works. And what I like to tell people is walk 90 seconds and then take a break until your heart rate slows down and your oxygen saturation perks up above 90. Usually the closer to 100, the better. So take breaks. And there's a reason why I say 90 seconds. And the reason is because aerobic metabolism, the metabolism that processes the most oxygen at the highest heart rate, which throws off the most energy to you, is disabled typically in chronic fatigue syndrome. And it kicks in at about 90 seconds. Anaerobic metabolism, which is still intact in you, typically operates from 0 to 90 seconds. So people with fatigue do have the ability to create energy and metabolize oxygen just at a limited capacity. You can look up terms like anaerobic metabolism and aerobic metabolism and get a better understanding of what these things are. But for the purposes of this video, I'm trying to keep it simple. Anaerobic metabolism is available to you and typically operates from 0 to 90 seconds of exercise. So if you want to be the safest that you can with your walking, start